Hello, my name is Kathryn and I work at Seamus, Heaney. Listen Now Again. The thing we often forget about ageing is that it is a lifelong process. It doesn't just start when you reach a certain milestone, it's always happening and we're always changing. If you have read Heaney's 12 collections of poetry, or at least some of them, you will see that Heaney's subject matter and his poetic style changes with the years. Many of us are very familiar with Heaney's early work. In his 20s, he wrote the very famous Digging, Midterm Break, and Blackberry Picking. In his early poems, he's very much rooted in the earth of rural Derry where he grew up. He also writes of romance in its earliest stages, starting out as a poet, and of childhood memories. But as he ages and his poetry evolves with him, we are introduced to poems that deal with the experiences of a more mature writer. For instance, we see marital quarrels and reconciliations, poems about the births of children, and also elegies for lost loved ones. In The Hall Lantern, Heaney's 7th collection, there are numerous poems exploring the theme of loss. His mother died in 1984, and he wrote a sequence of sonnets about her called Clearances. Heaney's father also died a couple of years later, and Heaney described this as his final unroofing. Of course, the death of loved ones are tragic experiences we have to deal with as we age, and Heaney writes numerous poems about his father's frailty in older age and the poet's sense of bereavement after his father is gone in the 1991 collection Seeing Things. However, when Heaney turned 50 in 1989, something changed for the better too. In the poem Fosterling, published in Seeing Things, Heaney can hardly believe that he waited until he was nearly 50 to credit marvels. The poem goes on, so long for air to brighten, time to be dazzled and the heart to lighten. Seeing Things is a collection that marks a turning point for Heaney. It sparks a moment of uplift where he lifts his head from earth to air. And we see a range of poems about simple things becoming infused with the supernatural. There are many poems about his late father, but the poem A Pillowed Head, recalling the birth of Heaney's daughter in 1973, acknowledges that while there is a time to grieve, there is a time to be joyful too. In Heaney's last full volume of poetry, Human Chain, which was published in 2010, Heaney contemplates the autumn of life and the obstacles that this brings, such as the stroke that he experienced in 2006. In the aftermath of the stroke, he had to take a year away from his busy schedule of events and writing, and Heaney said that he actually enjoyed this time recuperating, and he had more time in his hands to just enjoy reading some novels, something he hadn't allowed himself the time for before. Interestingly, his genre of choice was quite unusually crime fiction. In one poem within Human Chain, Heaney adapts the gospel miracle of the paralysed man being lowered through a roof to Jesus to be healed into a poem which celebrates the friends who brought the man to the house. So the poem is called Miracle, and Heaney knows all too well what it is to be stretcher bound and uncertain, but he salutes those who came to his aid when he suffered the stroke. Not the one who takes up his bed and walks, he writes, but the ones who have known him all along and carry him in. Heaney offers his opinions on growing into old age, which brings with it many positive changes, like the enjoyment of spending time with grandchildren. And Heaney references the age of births, when he is delighted to welcome his 3 granddaughters into the world, Avine, Anna Rose and Shifra. He wrote each of them a poem, and Route 110 was written for the arrival of Anna Rose. It plots the descent into the underworld from Virgil's Aeneid, Book 6, against moments in the poet's own life, for instance from a Belfast bookshop in the 1950s to the birth of his first grandchild. Bernard O'Donoghue writes that the human chain links the poet after his stroke to his wife's hand, but its linkage extends too from his own grandfather and parents to his granddaughters, linking family past to future. Ultimately, Heaney is able to connect the past with the future and the mundane with the timeless, and he did so in an increasingly masterful way as he aged and appreciated the aging process. Thank you for listening.